What's going on, hunters? Welcome back to Winter Wolf's Den. Winter Wolf here, and I'm proud to announce that we've actually hunted something worthwhile for a change. Something that doesn't come around to these days, it seems like. A worthwhile horror flick to check out now that we're coming up on spooky Halloween season. That's right, I'm talking to you guys about Smile, an original horror picture that just came through to theaters this past Friday. And you know what? For a change, I actually don't have a lot of bad things to say about this. You know, I'm going to get into some spoilers later, maybe. We'll see what happens. I'll give you a warning if I do. But I feel like this has been a long time coming for me. I can't remember the last good horror movie that I saw in theaters. I remember the last good horror movie that I saw, that I picked up on Redbox forever ago now, was the original Sinister movie, which clawed at my psyche for weeks after that came out. But back to the topic at hand here. We got Smile that just came through is reminiscent in terms of tone and style of other movies like Mirrors that had Kiefer Sutherland, like 10 years ago. Movies like Oculus, movies like The Conjuring and Insidious to a degree. And this, I guess, is a minor spoiler here for the ending. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is definitely the kind of horror movie where the protagonist doesn't get away, they don't win, they lose. And I dig that in horror movies because I feel like you got two different kinds of horror flicks in American horror for the most part. You get the slasher flicks that the teen scream queen is probably going to prevail at the end. So they're never in any real danger unless they're part of an ensemble cast and kind of the weight of the show is carried by multiple people. But whenever you have the one-off that you know is going to be the final girl, you know she's going to be fine. But movies like Smile and the other ones that I mentioned, you're never really sure. There's a palpable dread that kind of comes on right from the opening credits all the way through to the end, where you kind of know this poor woman is decompensating because she can't grasp the level of the evil, of the malevolence that's pursuing her. Her training as a mental health provider doesn't grant her any additional insight down the stretch when the chips are all down, and you really end up empathizing with her as she continues to suffer as she's tormented through the end of the movie. Now, story-wise, it's an updated take on things like The Ring, most notably, things like The Grudge, where there's kind of a curse in play, and you can only get rid of it, as she finds out, if you can pass on the trauma of watching something violent happen, like a suicide or a death. That's the only way you can get out of it, is basically you have only so much time before the evil thing drives you crazy and you wind up offing yourself. So one other character figured out along the way that if you manage to traumatize somebody else by committing a violent act to a third party, it would end up being to the witness of the violent event. But anyway, really, all around, I got nothing but good things to say about this one. The lead actress plays by, I believe her name is Sosie Bacon. She's I think she's a psychologist that kind of treats patients in the emergency mental health setting. The first case you see her handle when the screen opens up is a young lady that comes in who's paranoid, delusional. She's in the middle of a panic attack. She's freaking out left, right, and sideways. That's something that only she can see is smiling at her, and it's telling her to do awful things and that she's almost out of time. And no shock there because it's basically in the trailer. That patient ends up killing herself in front of the therapist, who then is afflicted with the curse and basically has her own increasingly awful set of breakdowns along the way through the end of the movie as she tries to cope with the spirit. But there's a lot of great things to take away from this flick, and I don't want to ramble too much about her performance, which was absolutely top down perfection. She started well put together. You start to see the hair go, the makeup's on a little bit less. She starts snapping at people a little bit more, and then everything just escalates into semi-violent outbursts where she actually considers committing a murder of her own to pass the curse off onto the next person. So it was pretty good performance by her. Sound design on this one, and I'm not usually a big sound guy, but good god damn, chef's kiss in this one. There were tones and musical elements and stinger sound effects, things like that, all kinds of things that kind of just reminded me of old Nightmare on Elm Street, reminded me of old Exorcist, reminded me of even old like Evil Dead, like some of the modulated sound effects of the evil spirits in the woods when a couple of things laughed at her in certain places here just instantly threw me right back to Evil Dead. So you can see where the writer the writer and the director, I think it was the same guy on this one, where he was coming from. He was definitely throwing his homage out there to the past greats, and I thought that was good. It was nice to see that. The story kind of progressed as realistic and logical as you could in this kind of movie. A lot of things were set up that were paid off near the end. I'm not going to blow them here, so you guys can just, if you're going to get out to see it, you can definitely check that out. A couple of things that have come across here to veterans of the horror genre like myself. If you came up watching horror flicks, through the 80s and 90s, you're going to be familiar with what might come across as a little formulaic in this one, but honestly, it didn't bother me. I didn't really feel like the pacing ever dragged me down to where I was checking my phone or my watch to make sure it was almost time to go. There was always something interesting going on with the lead actress, like nervous tics that she was having or just her body language. Always kept me on the edge of my seat as I was watching it. And other interesting things that happened too were how people started interacting with her, particularly her boss and her sister, who know her, presumably know her the best out of anybody in the world here, and they can see her marked decline into insanity, and they start interacting with her a little differently as she starts burning professional and personal bridges with the people closest to her. So there's always something nifty going on to keep you kind of like glued to the screen and not wanting to browse on your phone while it got through like a slogging second act. I didn't find that to be the case. Story-wise, like I said, an original enough take. And if you haven't seen this kind of genre horror before, you'd probably find it completely novel. You might recognize some of the cues from other things with certain jump scares and plot devices that they use, but really, they execute it well enough that you can't really complain about it. It was kind of a fresh spin put on an old story with a really compelling performance, and I'm beating that horse to death on this one because it was really that good, and I did appreciate the work that the actors put in to sell me on somebody having the breakdown. I'm only going to give you guys a couple of nitpicks on this one because honestly, I'm not shitting too bad all over this. There was a little bit of forced conflict between the main character and her fiance. We're kind of like out of nowhere, she's accusing him of always not being around when things get difficult, or being afraid of conflict and not being able to communicate and stuff like that. And while I get that had a logical place in the story they were trying to tell, as she's clawing at whatever kind of stability she can get a hold of, she would lash out in that way. They hadn't really set up that this guy was anything other than a decent person and like a good husband to be, leading into that point where she's having that ultimate breakdown as we get into Act 3. So I scratched my head a little bit on that one. I'm like, all right, I get it. You're cutting off every bridge you have, but this dude didn't really do anything that earned this, and then we never see him again in the movie after this conversation. So it was a little off on that, but not awful. Then my only other gripe with this, and I feel like they really overplayed their hand with this one. So any points that I take off from the movie in my rating, are mostly because of this here, is the movie did a good enough job selling me being afraid of people smiling at the main character by holding shots a little too long, and the creepy smiles you can see up there in the shoulder behind me with the young lady that's the initial victim in the film there. They overplayed their hand when they get to the end, and the creature itself is actually revealed on screen. A glance here or there would not have been bad. You can sell it to that. I mean, they show you the shark eventually in Jaws. They show you Freddy eventually. But they're at their most terrifying when you only get glimpses. And then when they give you the full reveal of what the creature looks like, and you'll get to it at some point, but in its most obvious frequent form that they show you in the climax of the film, it's basically just like a tall humanoid kind of thing with some blunted facial features, I guess, and some bad makeup, and the hair's a little weird, the teeth are a little weird, and that would have been okay in glances, but they let some shots just linger, and I'm like, okay, you kind of just look like a dude in makeup now. And they doused a little water on the fire they had going, and I was kind of like, we didn't really need all that. You really didn't need to linger on this thing and then let it talk, because then it actually talks in like a normal-ish voice as it's kind of talking with her. And I'm kind of like, oh, you should have just only ever showed it from like the mouth up. That way you only saw the smile and had it be a fucked up smile or something. Or if the entirety of its head was just one giant smile or something. I don't know. A million things you could have done. But I feel like maybe this is a budgetary thing and they were keeping costs down, didn't want to mess around with CGI or practical effects. Like John Carpenter's The Thing, this was not, when it comes down to the creature effects at the end. But outside of that and the kind of forced conflict with the fiance, which was a little disappointing now that I think of it a little bit more for you guys here, because the conflict with her sister was really good, and the actors really hammered that point home as that relationship. You got a little bit of their backstory. When that crumbled, it hurt a little bit. Like they played it well, and then her boss having to send her home on the paid administrative leave as she has like a breakdown and an issue in the hospital that she's working at, like that hurt, and that comes back later in the film too. So it's kind of like they kind of swung and missed a little bit on the issue with the fiance. But overall, guys, as far as horror movies go, this is a good one to kick off the Halloween season with. I'm gonna give it a solid 8 out of 10, and that's only because I really don't ever hand out 9s or 10s, because you really got to be perfect fit for that, or kind of like creep me out or make me scared to go into my basement at home after I see the flick. And it didn't quite get me to that level, but it got me checking the back seat when I got to the car, and I appreciate that, because I'm a sucker for these movies. I do really enjoy them. So I think for the month of October, we're gonna get coverage of a couple of the movies that I really do enjoy. We'll probably do Sinister, because I definitely love that. I got a thing for clowns, so maybe It Chapter 1, and maybe a classic thing like maybe a slasher. But let me know in the comments below if you've stuck around this long. I appreciate it. I'd love to give you guys a vote on what I cover for horror movies this month. If you'd like to see something, comment. Otherwise, please like button, notifications, all that good stuff, and I will see you guys in the next one.